Hello, this is Night Sky Jeff. This is my second video on Kyle Adams's recent videos on Einstein and the equivalence principle. I will be dealing with his unlisted video, Einstein's Failure 3, Weightlessness. My video will not deal with the topic of weightlessness yet. That will be my next video. Instead, I will focus on the beginning part of Kyle's video here, where he talks about acceleration, weight, and uses the term g-force. Now I'm starting around the 43-second mark. He has a claim here. If Einstein was right in his claim that things fall because the Earth were actually accelerating upward, then everything on Earth would have the same weight. So this is kind of a claim that he made previously, and he's going to be talking about this claim in this part of the video.
Our debate board member asked me, if F equals ma, then that means a man with a lot of mass should have more force than a baby when moving at the same acceleration. How does that work with your claim that if the Earth was accelerating upward, everything on Earth should have the same weight?
Okay, so that's the claim that Kyle made. Now it should be noted that Einstein did not claim that things fall because the Earth is accelerating upward, as if this were some universal truth that the Earth everywhere is accelerating upward, which is why in Kyle's mind this means the Earth is constantly exploding outward. This is an example of Kyle misunderstanding Einstein's equivalence principle. So to state the equivalence principle simply again, the equivalence principle states that gravitational mass and inertial mass are equivalent. And so the weight perceived by a mass in a gravitational field is equivalent to the weight perceived by that same mass in an accelerated frame of reference. In other words, the laws of physics are the same for an apple subject to a downward acceleration of 9.8 meters per second due to Earth's gravity, as they are for that same apple being accelerated at 9.8 meters per second upward. Let's let Kyle continue.
Well, that's a great question. Let's take a look at that. Here we have three different masses: the mass of the man, the mass of the baby, and the mass of the entire Earth. And if the Earth were causing them all to accelerate at the same rate, since they each have different amounts of mass, they would all indeed have different amounts of force, even though the same force is pushing on all of them.
I feel like Kyle is using the word force here in two ways. First, he's making the same mistake that I covered in my previous video. An object of mass m being accelerated at rate a does not have force F. Rather, force F is required to accelerate an object of mass m at a rate a. And when he says the same force is pushing on all of them, I think what he means generally is the force of the Earth moving upward. But the Earth moving upward is pushing on these two people with forces of different magnitudes. It needs to push harder on the man than on the child in order to accelerate them identically, because the man has more mass than the child.
But this force is something different than their weight. This force would be going upward, but their weight is something that goes downward.
The force with which the Earth pushes up on these two people is the same magnitude as the force of their weight. If the force of the Earth pushing on the man were more than his weight, he would be accelerated off the ground. And if the force of the Earth pushing on the man were less than his weight, he'd be sinking into the ground. The fact that the magnitudes of the Earth's force upward and the man's force downward are the same, that equilibrium, is why the man is stationary on the Earth. If the Earth were pushing up with less force, the man's force is greater and the man goes down. If the Earth is pushing up with more force than the man's weight, the man goes up. But because the two forces are in balance, in equilibrium, the man is neither going up nor down. You could say that the force of the Earth pushing up on the people is not the force of their weight, but it does have the same magnitude, simply in an opposite direction.
In this instance, our weight can be seen as the amount of g-force we feel in a car when the car accelerates.
Just to say, each of us, while we're standing on Earth, is experiencing 1g, or we're undergoing 1g force. But Kyle is going to use the term g-force here, I think, in a confusing way, so I'll let him talk.
Despite all the passengers in the car having different masses, we all feel the same amount of g-force. Thus, our weight would be the same. In order for one person to experience more g-force than another person here, one person would have to be accelerating faster than another person, and that would result in the car breaking in two.
Okay, so there you see his animation of the Earth exploding because it's accelerating at different rates in every direction. I want to go back. I might play this section again as I talk about it. So Kyle is using the term g-force here. Unfortunately for him, he's wrong about what he's claiming here, as a recent video of his demonstrated, and I will get into that video in another week or two, whatever. When the car accelerates, the people feel a weight backwards, and that weight that they feel is proportional to their masses. The man in the driver's seat feels a different weight than the boy because their masses are different. When Kyle is using the term g-force, he's thinking of it as referring to mass times acceleration, when really it means acceleration as a multiple of 9.8 meters per second per second. So if you're undergoing a g-force of 2g, it means you're accelerating at 19.6 meters per second per second. That's 9.8 times 2. So you would feel twice as heavy as normal in the direction opposite that acceleration. So let me play this section of his video again, and I'll pause it when I want to make a comment.
A car when the car accelerates. Despite all the passengers in the car having different masses, we all feel the same amount of g-force.
Yes, because the g-force, okay, so the way he's using g-force is again, it's confusing. All of these passengers feel the same g-force. That g-force is x times 9.8 meters per second, where x times 9.8 meters per second equals the acceleration of the car. So if the car is accelerating at 9.8 meters per second, they're experiencing 1 g-force. But each of them is experiencing that force on their mass. And so 1 g-force for a very massive person is more in terms of actual force than 1 g-force on the small boy, because his mass is less. Kyle is using the term g-force, and it's simply confusing because it has the word force in it, when really it means your acceleration in terms of 9.8 meters per second, 1g. Okay. Because that's such a complex and annoying and confusing topic, I think that's enough for this video. My next video will deal with the remainder of this video of Kyle's, where he tackles the concept of weightlessness. And for those of you who are wondering, I'm drinking a Negroni. It's possibly my favorite cocktail ever. This has been Night Sky Jeff. Remember, keep looking up.